Good morning. How are you all today? Thank you for visiting with us, and we're continuing our studies from the book of 1 Kings. We're in chapter 10 today, looking at the subject, Bathsheba visits Solomon. And in this chapter 10, we'll be looking at what Jesus talked about in Matthew 12:42 and Luke, the 11th chapter, I think around 31. But Jesus identifies the queen of the south as being Bathsheba. And he says to the people, the queen of the south shall indict the children of this generation, because she came from the farthest part of the earth to visit King Solomon, and behold, a greater than Solomon is here. So she will rise up in the judgment, but the fact that Bathsheba is the southernmost border of Palestine, whereas Dan is the northernmost boundary of Palestine. And so you hear throughout the scriptures of the Old Testament from Dan to Bathsheba. And Bathsheba is the southernmost border of the land of Palestine. And so we begin our subject today, Bathsheba visits Solomon, and this is King Solomon. And so, and verse 1, let's see, 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 1. And when the queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, she came to prove him or examine him with hard questions. Verse 2, and she came to Jerusalem with a very great train, with camels that bear spices, and very much gold, and precious stones. And when she was come to Solomon, she spoke with him, or she communed with him, of all that was in her heart. She wanted to ask him hard questions because she had heard of the fame of Solomon. Now she's coming to examine him herself. And when it says she came to Jerusalem with a very great train, that's like a caravan with servants and precious jewels and produce to give to the king. And so she came and she communed, spoke with him of all that was in her heart. Verse 3. And Solomon told or answered her all her questions. There was not anything hid or held back from the king which he told her not. All of her questions Solomon answered and didn't hold anything back. Verse 4. And when the queen of Sheba had seen all Solomon's wisdom, and the house that he had built, and the meat of the food of his table, and the sitting of his servants, and the attendance of his ministers, and their apparel, and his cupbearers, and his ascent, or his way of going to, and his ascent by which he went up unto the house of the Lord. There was no more spirit in her. In other words, she had no more questions. He answered all of her questions, and that left no more spirit in her. in that she was satisfied by seeing the wisdom of King Solomon. Verse 6. And she said to the king, it was a true report that I heard in mine own land of thy acts and of thy wisdom. Verse 7, howbeit I believed not the words until I came, and mine eyes had seen it, and behold, the half was not told me. Thy wisdom and prosperity exceeded the fame which I heard. And this is the Queen of the South. Verse 8. Happy are thy men, happy of these thy servants, which stand continually before thee and hear thy wisdom. Verse 9. Blessed be the Lord thy God, which delighteth in thee, to set thee on the throne of Israel, because the Lord loved Israel forever. Therefore made he thee king to do judgment and justice, to investigate an issue and give the sentence of whatever the judgment is, and be just, and it be justice in that it will be fair and equal. Verse 10. And she gave to the king 120 talents of gold, and of spices very great store, and precious stones. There came no more such abundance of spices as these which the Queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Verse 11. And the navy also of Hiram that brought gold from Ophir, brought in from Ophir great plenty of almug trees and precious stones. And that's referring back to chapter 8 of 1 Kings, verse 27. And Hiram was the king of Tyre. And also the builder of the temple's name was Hiram, but he was a skillful worker. Verse 12. And the king made of the almug trees pillars for the house of the Lord and for the king's house, harps also and psalteries are musical instruments for singers. There came no such almug trees, nor were seen unto this day. Now in Northern California, you have the redwood trees, and I was privileged to go there a few years ago. And those are some of the most beautiful trees, but they don't compare to what these algum trees look like and stood for. And they're also called red sandalwood trees. So of these, they've made the house of God, the temple, Solomon's house, and all the harps and instruments for singers. They were made of these algum trees. And King Solomon gave unto the Queen of Sheba all her desire, whatsoever she asked. So he answered, her desire was to have her questions answered to prove whether the reputation of Solomon was true. So beside that, or in addition to that which Solomon gave her of his royal bounty, meaning his wisdom. So she turned, after she heard that, she turned and went to her own country, she and her servants. And now, verse 14, it's going to show how rich King Solomon was. Verse 14, now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 600 threescore and 600 6 talents of gold. Verse 15, in addition to that, beside that he had of the merchantmen and of the traffic of the spice merchants, and of all the kings of Arabia, and of the governors of the country. So Solomon reigned over all these people. Verse 16, and King Solomon had 200 targets or weapons of beaten gold. 600 shekels of gold went to one target. Verse 17, and he made 300 shields of beaten gold. 3 pounds of gold went to one shield. And the king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon. And that's where he got the trees from. And this house of Lebanon housed the military weapons of war. Verse 18, moreover, the king made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with the best gold. Verse 19, the throne had, this ivory stone had 6 steps, and the top of the throne was round behind. And there were stays, armrests on both sides on the place of the seat. 2 lions stood beside the stays or the armrests. 20, and 12 lions stood there on the one side and on the other upon the 6 steps. There was not the like made in any kingdom. Verse 21, and all King Solomon's drinking vessels were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. None were of silver. It was nothing accounted of in the days of Solomon. No one questioned Solomon's riches or his reign as king. 22, for the king had at sea a navy of Tarshish with the navy of Hiram. Let me read verse 22 again. For the king had at sea a navy of Tarshish with the navy of Hiram. Once in 3 years, or once every 3 years, came the navy of Tarshish bringing gold and silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. Verse 23, so King Solomon exceeded all the kings of the earth for riches and for wisdom. Verse 24, and all the earth sought to Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart. Verse 25, and they brought every man his present, vessels of silver and vessels of gold and garments and armor and spices, horses and mules, a rate year by year. And Solomon gathered together chariots and horsemen, and he had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horsemen, whom he bestowed in the city for chariots, and with the king at Jerusalem. And the king made silver to be in Jerusalem as stones, and cedars made he to be as sycamore trees that are in the valley for abundance, because of the abundance that he had. 28. And Solomon had horses brought out of Egypt, and linen yarn. The king's merchants received the linen yarn at a certain price. 29, and a chariot came up and went out of Egypt for 600 shekels of silver, and an horse for 150. And so for all the kings of the Hittites and for the kings of Assyria, did they bring them out by their means or their way of transport. This is about exporting from Egypt into Jerusalem under the leadership of King Solomon. And so with him getting things out of Egypt will lead to his turning his heart away from God for his wives and concubines. And we'll see that next time. So you all have a good day and a blessing to your families, your friends, and we'll see you next time. And we will continue our studies in chapter 11 of 1 Kings. So you all have a great day and a great week. Bye.